Hi, and welcome to Dear Art Producer. I am your host, Heather Elder, and today is June 11th, 2025, and we're welcoming back freelance art producer Kathleen Candelaria. It's been 5 years since her last visit, and in that time, the world faced a global pandemic, our approach to work and production evolved, AI-generated content took center stage, and conversations around intellectual property, authenticity in art, and advertising have only intensified. With so many shifts and hot topics emerging, I invited Kathleen back to share her perspective. With over 30 years of experience and a passion for collaboration, she's helped bring creative visions to life for clients like Takeda, Amgen, Boeing, Kmart, Hampton Inn, and Johnson & Johnson. We're excited to hear her insights. Welcome back, Kathleen. Hello.
Hi, Heather. It's great to be here.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to hear your voice. And we're not seeing each other. It's so funny. We're like not on a little Zoom thing, but it's just great to hear your voice and be connected with you again.
Thanks. Same here.
So just kind of getting right into it, I like to always talk a little bit and give our listeners a little bit of a background on you. So maybe you can just kind of let us know about where you started and kind of how you ended up doing what you're doing and maybe a little bit about what you've been up to in the last 5 years.
Sure. So it's funny. I always tell my kids to follow their passion and it will lead to work that rewards them. And I always tell them that while you are looking for work and that they come across a job that someone who knows someone at the company, you reach out to that contact. It's not wrong to use who you know. You're still going to need to prove yourself and what you know in the job. I did that when I started out, and I was on the production side working for a photographer, then worked for a director who did stop motion, cell animation, and eventually CGI animation. I did then get into JWT, my first advertising agency job. And from there, I got into art buying in their department and trained under some legendary art buyers. I've moved around from there, and now I am newly embarking on a freelance career. I'm very excited.
That's so great. I'm a little jealous as a freelancer in the summer. I hope it works out in your favor. Yeah. Okay, can you share with us a little bit about your role as an art producer? Do you still call yourself an art producer? What does that role look like?
Right. So yes, first and foremost, I am an art producer. That I'm based in stills. I love photography. That's my passion. But as we evolve and as needs change as producers, we all know that we're kind of integrated and doing everything. So I, first call myself an art producer / integrated producer. It involves any or all of these roles at once, which are planning, consulting on timing and budgets for different scale productions, sourcing appropriate vendors for the projects, close collaboration with the creative teams on that, gathering all necessary materials and information for bidding, making sure everybody's on the same page before we begin bidding, working with a cost consultant if that's needed by the client, negotiating with vendors, prepping estimates, and presenting a recommendation for the award, on-site management of a shoot, understanding copyright law and licensing, scheduling and budget management, and then post-production management. And finally, I love mentoring. I have a lot of information that I've gathered over the years, a lot of knowledge, and things have changed in the industry, but I feel that what I can contribute to young people and mentor is a great deal.
I love that you said that. Because, we see a lot of turnover with all the mergers of the big holding companies and the agencies being purchased. And, there's some redundancy we're hearing about, and people who are now becoming freelance. And I think it's really interesting to think about who is doing the role that some of these people were doing for many, many, many years, right? And do they have the same knowledge base and the history of, the evolution of the department and the role and the processes and all of the things, at an agency that are, important, So I love the idea that you value mentoring, because this next generation of producers, whether they be art producers, integrated producers, in any form, really need to have people who came before them kind of show them a little bit, of the way.
Right. And, honestly, I learn a lot from them as well.
Yeah.
So, they have a lot to contribute and keep me young. So
Yeah.
I enjoy that.
I remember I went to Boston University and I spoke there a few years ago, and it was at a particularly hard job market time. And, I remember saying to everybody in the audience, like, you guys are the next generation of like and we are going to be looking to you to help us figure out, what production and advertising and marketing, all of those things are going to look like. I think just mentoring is super important. And I really appreciate that you included that in your answer.
Great.
So tell me what you're known for on your team.
Well, I like to think that people really appreciate how I can find a perfect match creatively, professionally, and personally that fits the project. I like to think that creatives trust my experience and will listen to my advice. I've learned to become more persuasive in expressing why I'm, certain that a certain person will be the right fit. And if I really believe it, I don't have a problem expressing that to the creative team. So I think that's important.
I love that. What does that look like for you, being more persuasive?
Well, I would just probably ask them why they're not considering the person I'm recommending as my top choice. I would probably ask them, what they're just uncomfortable about and make them comfortable. Let them know that production-wise will be strong and things will run smoothly.
Yeah, no, that's great. Tell me what you love about your job.
Oh gosh, this hands down is the easiest question to answer.
I love that.
From the beginning, I've had the opportunity to work with extremely talented and even famous artists for incredible companies and even travel to destinations I may have never seen. Not to mention all of the people I've had the pleasure to know throughout my entire career. And I still work with them today, just like you.
Yeah.
Finally, I'm always learning something new every day. Sometimes in places I would least expect it, but there's so much more technology, information, and you have to make it a point to be learning every moment you can.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I know, I think back, you mentioned JWT, and I was like, wow, is that where we met?
Probably. That I know. I started setting up all their rep shows for them.
Oh, that's probably where we met. I love that. And I think it's so important to recognize, being either an art producer or an integrated producer or even a rep, sometimes you feel like you're in a bit of a vacuum, right? You're just got your head down and you're just working, but it opens up so many relationship opportunities, right? It's like a bit of a spider web. All the people that you and I have met and worked with over the years really become your, network, and of not just friends, but, people you rely on to help you get a job done.
Right.
And it's nice to look back on a career at no matter what point you're at and recognize, like, wow, you're really building something really quite special there. So let's talk a little bit about AI. Are you being asked to create with AI? Like, what's the conversation around AI with you?
Right. Well, it's typically highly encouraged within an organization to embrace AI legally and ethically. There's questions around the legality and all the making sure you're within being legitimate. But there are ethical questions too, especially in pharma advertising. If we are incorporating any of these tools, we are very honest to our clients about it. And if they're uncomfortable, we don't do it. But really, most agencies are creating their own engines or looking to producers or business managers for outside sources that will allow them to use the engines safely, and then don't retain the content you're generating. That's another big concern. And I always tell anyone who asks me to utilize, or if I'm utilizing it, it's just like any other tool in our toolbox, and it has its appropriate uses. Agencies use it a lot for concepting now, where we would go out and do a lot of vendor work for concepting. Creatives are able to do that kind of work. But for me, when it comes down to creating and crafting the work, we still need a human touch. And I love, pharma has a lot of concepts that are, or campaigns that are conceptual, fantastical, and I think that application is great. But there are often times that we need humanity and authenticity in that humanity. And I don't think you get that with AI. So I think there will be, just like any other new technology, a big surge for people to want to use it and engage in it and talk about it. But then I think there will be a pullback and it'll be used for the adequate uses, but I think we will still need the craft.
So let me ask you a question about kind of protocol of using AI. And, I know that there are some agencies that we work with that if we are going to use, we're only allowed to use certain AI tools.
Yes.
Is that the same at, let's say the last agency you worked at?
Yes. Yeah. For instance, there was a project that an artist that we were engaging with, we liked the look of a stock photo, but we couldn't use it because it wasn't licensable. So it became unlicensable. So we went to him and he said, well, I will shoot pieces. I will feed it into an AI tool and generate a unique look. And we said, fine, but what tool are you using? How is that information that's fed in retained in that tool? We just made sure that there was nothing that would, interfere with our clients' confidentiality. Basically. Yeah.
Interesting. It's such a buzzword and there's so much excitement and obviously fear around it. And there's also still so many limitations. So it's interesting to hear, how you were kind of navigating the conversation. So thank you for that.
It's approach with caution, just like anything when we're unsure of the risks of legal risks and things like that. And again, I think in my mind, I always want to be fair to the artists too. We don't want to just be taking scrap and feeding it in and calling it our own. You can't do that. So I think that's where people have to just understand. And most of the people in our industry and in the business know and can comprehend that and respect it.
Yeah, no, and I think because there are all these legal guardrails right now, I think it is also giving people time to kind of figure out how can we navigate this and still be able to use it? Because as you say, it's a tool. Right. And my husband says this all the time. It's a power tool, right?
Yeah.
And we want to be able to use it, but we want to be able to use it right. Awesome. Okay. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about motion projects and photography projects. What do you, in your experience, how many of your projects, like what percentage of your projects tend to be motion and what tend to be still?
Right. So I specialize in photo production, but 90% of those projects will include some sort of motion aspect. It may not be that we're shooting video, but I'll usually help to brainstorm on how to incorporate motion when a budget wouldn't support shooting live action, say. So whether it's GIFs or cinemagraphs, something like that, we're figuring out what fits the campaign to bring it to life in motion.
Yeah, and what percentage did you say tends to have motion related to it?
Oh gosh, 90 to 95%. Yeah, because you're wanting to do digital work that they usually want motion on now. So
yeah, the algorithms favor motion, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so when a project does include motion, do you tend to call a director first, or do you call a photographer?
Yeah, well, of course, I'll always ask the question about what type of motion and what is the end use. And this will really inform me on who I want to reach out to first. For instance, if it is, if it is like snippets that are going to just be put together in a sizzle video or something, then I would probably look more towards a photographer. If it's an OLV, I may go to a production company, but work with a photographer that I would recommend. So I think, it does depend on but if it is a full-up broadcast, I'm going to go to a production company and look for a director.
And how about CGI? Do you utilize that at all?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. A lot.
Yeah.
And when I'm doing for stills and motion, and in fact, I just finished an OLV project that did include live action and VFX. And I do have extensive experience in pharma, and a lot of these campaigns are conceptual and utilize CGI. So it sets up a complexity for the production, but I love that. I love the different moving parts.
And does the process differ?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot going on when we're shooting live action and then incorporating with CGI, as you know. There has to be a lot of education on the process, sometimes to the internal creative team and account teams, but especially to the client. They never understand at which point we have to move on and we can't go back and make changes. And inevitably, but that's when I encourage a thorough treatment from the artists at the bidding stage and explaining these steps of the process. And that, it can be unique for each project too.
Yeah, I think you touched on something really important there, this idea of clients understanding when in the process you've moved on, right? You've approved and you can't really go back without unraveling all the work you've done after that.
Exactly. You go into overage and budget and time, you're going to be late then.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
That's hard to explain. It's hard. I mean, no matter how you explain it, and then you move on, and they inevitably there's something they catch later that they don't like.
And then they catch it later, and what they don't like is that it's going to cost a lot to go back to that.
Exactly.
That spot. And I think it's really hard. I feel like the people who understand it the best are almost the ones who've gotten burned by it.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about marketing to you. How are artists who want to get work from you, how are they connecting with you right now?
Emails obviously are the easiest, probably most practical way for people to market. And even though I do receive a lot, I still think it's the best way, but you have to be smart about it. You have to just really stand out, show me what's important to make you stand out. Let me know what you want to show me. Let me know if you want to show me a new job or project you just completed that you're psyched about. Like, oh, I just worked on this with this client and this is what we did. Or maybe you're a new artist with a unique perspective, or you're trying something new, but make sure your subject line grabs me, and then I'll look further. And I will always save into a file things that catch me and use that as part of where I research when I'm looking for new talent or for talent for projects.
Do you kind of bookmark websites or, follow people on Instagram? Like, is the email the tip of the iceberg for you, where you start to kind of dig down and learn more about the artist after you're intrigued by the email maybe?
Yes. Yeah. So I don't always follow them on Insta, but I probably will more now. I just don't know why I never did that before. But yes, if I have their website, I would go to the website then and delve deeper and definitely bookmark that into different categories for sure. Yeah.
Is there a more useful message that kind of rises to the top for you when you're getting emails, or is it also just kind of timing?
No, I just think personalize it to what you want to promote to me. I just, if there's something special about a project or, something unique, maybe there was a production issue that was solved brilliantly. I just want to see, something that's going to grab my eye and make you look smart.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I mean, I tell my artists sometimes when we're thinking about what to put in the emails, what is the added value that we're giving someone besides showing them some really cool work, right? Exactly. Are there any pain points regarding that were involved in this production or this personal shoot or something that you can, a pain point that an art producer or creative might be having that you can solve with this case study or this project or something, how could you make their lives easier?
Something you overcame. Yes.
Yeah. And also I feel like it's just always a good reminder that those the email marketing is interruption marketing, right? We are literally interrupting your day and it's coming into your inbox when you're trying to work. And while you appreciate them and you look at them, whenever you can, and you file them away and they're a strong tool, I'm still interrupting you when I send it. So, I need to make sure that it's valuable to you, what I'm sending.
Right. Exactly. Perfect. Yep.
So how do you find talent for a project?
Oh, okay. So again, a lot of ways. A lot of times I'm involved in the creative development of a campaign. If I'm fortunate enough to start that early in the process, I'll start thinking about how we'll execute each of these campaigns they're coming up with, what kind of talent I would use to execute each concept. And it would involve me in picking the brains of the creatives, of course, to make sure I understand the vision they're going after. But once I'm given a final campaign, I just think of anyone I've worked with in the past, any recent promos I've seen. I'll go through my bookmarks, my emails that I've put aside that have caught my eye. I'll specifically reach out to reps that I know have the kind of talent that I'm looking for, or maybe there are reps I may not have worked with, but I'm interested in seeing their talent. So I'll really run a broad search and gather as many options as I can, and then kind of maybe, weed it down to the best that I feel. And I get that out to the team, but knowing I always let them know if this is not your vision, if there's something else you're looking for, try to steer me in give me feedback so I can go in the right direction. And that might take one or two times, but typically at the end, we're whittling down to, we have to whittle down to 3 bidders, but they may have 4 or 5 that they really love. And then I just make sure timing works and we, work that out in the end. But
it's pretty amazing. And I try and remind my artists of this all the time. When there were portfolios, I would know that you were looking at my artist because you'd call the portfolio in, right? I'd send it to you and you'd look at it and you'd send it back. And sometimes there was feedback, sometimes there wasn't. Now you could be looking at an artist of mine and I would have absolutely no idea. And they may or may not make it to the short list because you're putting their link in an email to a creative, right? Say, hey, check this person out. So there's a lot of work that is being looked at behind the scenes that artists just don't have any knowledge of. So while they might think it's slow or they're not being considered for a job or does anybody know my work, it's likely people are looking at your work, but whether or not you've made it to that short list, is another conversation. But it's so interesting. I just, as a rep, there's a lot of that information I no longer have available to me.
Right.
But thank you anytime you've put them on a list.
Of course. And, I do sometimes reach out and, we'll talk about it. I'll say, hey, I have this thing coming up. I'm just not sure about who to use, but who do you think is a great fit? And so I do. But like you said, it could just be me searching and looking on a site and recommending somebody and you won't even know about it.
Yeah. And sometimes too, like if you reach out to me and you say, hey, who do you have? Right. And I share a link with you. A lot of times I don't tell my artists that I've done that either, because I don't want you're not going to get back to me and be like, Heather, they weren't right. And here's why. I mean, maybe you will, but like you're 10 steps ahead at that point. So I don't ever expect you to do that. So by telling the artist sometimes that I sent along their link, it's not like I'm sending, they're one of 3 being considered.
Right. It's not like, at that point, they'll be asking too many questions.
Exactly. And it's a bit of a disappointment, and you need to be able to do so, look at these things freely without
indiscriminately.
Without the expectation of like, oh, I have to get back to Heather. Or, it's just like, if you had to do that, like, yes, you probably do want to get back to me, but you've probably reached out to 10 other people. Now, if you have to get back to 10 other people, it's like, that's your day.
Well, that's on me. I took that route.
Exactly. So what are some trends maybe that you're seeing in creation right now, whether it be photography, animation?
Well, obviously the AI stuff, which I'm not thrilled about. I mean, like I said, it's a tool and I think it's great and it will help us. But I really appreciate humanity and making people feel something warm or touching when they view an image and meaningful. I think you can get that out of AI, again, in its appropriate places, but I'd like to hopefully see it trend. Like, I know it's going to trend to this super AI, whatever look that is, but I'm hoping it trends back.
Yeah, I agree. So in this process of finding talent, what would you like our listeners to know about this part of the process that they may not understand, or may not know about?
Well, when I'm like researching?
Yeah.
I guess I think what you've already talked about, there's so many options for us out there. It's overwhelming. And I appreciate anyone out there doing this, because 30 years ago when I started, I knew I couldn't promote myself in the way that would need to be promoted to make it as a commercial or independent photographer or anything. So I give them credit for that. And I would just say, you can't be discouraged. Just keep trying to make connections with people. I find when people are personable and personal, it just resonates with me, and I'll remember you better.
Do you feel comfortable hiring vendors you haven't worked with yet? Or do you tend to gravitate towards artists that you can trust right now?
I love using new talent for the right job, given that they either need to be with a good rep that will back up their production, or I'll typically, if they don't have a rep, I'll just ask them who they will be using as a producer on their end, or I'll recommend. If I know where we're going to be and I like a producer in that market, I'll just be like, hey, what about this person? I just need to know if it's a new person that they've got the production chops and that they will be backed up with a strong production. I have no problem convincing my teams to use somebody new that maybe they've never used or I've never used, because it's very exciting. It's refreshing, especially using younger people. I just want to make sure that the production is handled. And if I have a comfort level there, then I'm great.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. How about when you go to an artist's website, what is helpful for you to see on that website, and what is distracting and makes you be like, okay, forget it. I can't look at this site anymore.
Right. I would just say, make it easy to navigate. I've never built a website. I don't know what that means, but I would say just make it clear. If you have categories, make it very clear and easy to get to that. I would say make sure you do have whatever your specialty is to make you stand out as an artist. Make sure that comes across. Make it obvious what makes you stand out. I like it to be clean. Maybe an explanation. If it's a complicated production, I like to see maybe a before and after. If it has involved CGI and live action, the pieces being put together sometimes are nice, but not always necessary.
Although those are fun to see.
Right. It is. Because I'm always, when I've come up with a complicated visual and I'm just like, oh gosh, how are we going to produce it? I love to see how other people are producing things. So, just make it obvious what makes you stand out as an artist.
Let's move on a little bit and talk about the creative call. We know that it's critical. The qualities of what make a good creative call are, I would think, obvious, but I think they're also worth repeating.
Right.
So do you have any advice for artists in regards to a creative call?
Yes, I do.
Oh, good.
Please make sure you know the campaign we will be discussing. Make sure you've read all the materials so that you don't ask a question that the information was already provided for. Let us know what you bring to the table. Suggestions for getting the right cast, if that's important. How will we approach the production if it involves CGI and live action, etc.? What are your thoughts? What do you bring? What are your experiences? Maybe there's a project that had to do something very difficult that will help you with this project. And I like to see the photographer or director on camera during our calls. At this point, it's just kind of rude to be off camera if you can be on camera.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I know sometimes it's a bit of a challenge, right? Because they might be on a shoot or doing something that makes it a little bit harder.
Oh, yeah. And I totally understand. And if that is the case, I make sure my teams know. If they're on a client call, I just say, hey, so-and-so is being so kind to take a break from a busy shoot day with limited time, and they may not be on camera. Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And what makes a really great, let's start with what makes a bad creative call?
If they're not engaged, if they're just not talking, if they're not asking questions, not that they have to ask a question at every point, but just to know that we're engaged. Know that you're engaged, know that you're listening, know that you're hearing us. Yeah.
So for other people who are listening, I would also add, I would kind of draft off of what you were saying about how important it is to read everything and understand and have come with questions and, feel like you're prepared. Mm-hmm. And I know, Kathleen, you're going to be like, wait, that happens to you? But there are times that we don't even see the deck until we're on the call.
Yes. And I understand. And that is, I don't think that's fair. Obviously, I may not have bid specs to the rep or the producer right away, but I always try to have creative in hand a couple, a bit before we're even engaging.
Which is so important, right? Because the artist does want to feel
well, they need to have time to absorb and think about it, for sure.
Especially if we want to share something, right? Because sometimes we'll see something and be like, oh, wait, there's this project that we did over here. Let me cue this up and have it ready to go. There are times, obviously, when our timelines are just so crammed that I have to get things later, but it's important for a artist to see concepts or layouts, whatever, as early as possible. And my goal is, to get them involved as early as possible. What do you think about treatments? How much are they valued? Do your teams actually read them? Do you share them with your clients? To me, it's extremely valuable. Yes, the creatives read them. Often creatives will not share an entire treatment, but they'll pull pieces that they found valuable or hit a chord with them and was really on target to what they're trying to achieve. So we won't share a full treatment, but we'll maybe share parts of it to the client, typically. And they're super time consuming, as we all know. They cost money sometimes. And I wonder, if there's anything you've ever considered to kind of help ease the process for an artist, or do you just feel like it's kind of inevitable? Well, I think it's important to not just ask for a treatment, but maybe explain a little bit about what you're looking for in the treatment. Because again, for each project, it may be different. When we have live action and CGI, it's going to involve a lot of what that process is. I would ask them to make sure you're showing me each step of the way and how that works and what it means and what it looks like. So, and they're usually pretty understandable about that. So I think, yes, and I hate to be the one to say this, but I'm sure AI can help with this. Now, I do know that some photographers in the past have invested money in hiring people to help them write their treatments once they put their thoughts together. So I think, AI can maybe help to save some time, but it does involve, like you said, the photographer going back and thinking, there are things in my repertoire that I've done that are similar that I can share and whatnot. Yeah, I think the amount of time that goes into it is extensive. So having any input from the agency on what to concentrate on, like, oh, casting's really important here, or this client has a pet peeve with this, so make sure you address that and how that's going to be addressed. From where I sit, there's so often that we don't get that direction. So, our artists have been, for a while now, asking very pointed questions. Which of my images, or the motion work that I do stood out to you? I've always asked my creatives, what is it that you like about this person? Because that's what I want to show them. That's what you like.
Yeah.
So when it comes time to actually choose an artist and award that person the job, do you find that clients are choosing them based on their own criteria, or are they kind of deferring to you and your creative team for their recommendation?
Mostly they defer to agency partners' recommendations. There are some cases where a client may ask me to bid on a photographer, but not insist that we use them. Or if they insist we use someone that they've previously used, then I'll just outright ask them for a single bid. I don't want a triple bid with, if they know they want to shoot with someone.
Yeah.
But typically, if we're just running a campaign that they want to see all kinds of talent, then they're typically, unless there's something really off about the person that maybe they didn't like on a call, or because not so much with photographers, but with directors, we'll have directors calls with the clients. So other than that, I think they do take the agency lead in what we're recommending.
I love the idea of the director call with the client. Obviously, it's more common, like you said. But as I've always said, we do not have direct access to the client. So we can be as buttoned up and creative and, check all the boxes, have our numbers come in under budget. We could have like an incredibly strong presentation. Yet because we don't have access to the client, it really is out of our hands at that point, right?
It's the sales is up to the agency. Yeah,
exactly. And when, as an agency, you're pressured to share 3 talented artists and to be prepared to go with any one of them.
Right? Yeah. I always tell my creatives, make sure you are not including anybody you don't want to work with.
Right. Which was not always the case when triple bidding came around, right? So I would say that in the past, when triple bidding was originally a thing, if you were the recommended person, you were getting the job because things were kind of stacked in that direction, right? The agency, the creatives, everybody was pushing for that recommend. And for whatever reason, the time wasn't put in. Well, I know what the reason, because you wanted the other person, but the other two, the time really wasn't put into that, in like fine tuning the estimate and doing all the other things that were like needed to make them maybe apples to apples. And the the client would choose the recommend. Now I feel like because you have to be prepared to use whomever, you are putting the same amount of time into each of the 3 artists and really making sure everything is perfect.
Right.
Which means a lot more work for the 2 other people. Right.
Yep. Yeah.
And then when the client chooses, it really sometimes is like not that big of a deal if they don't go with the recommend, because you've got 3 really great choices.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when we don't get a job, we hear, well, the client chose, artist C. And there's not a lot of feedback as to why, because they just chose it. So it's, I think that's where sometimes the treatment process is frustrating for artists, because even if you're the recommend, it still can go in any direction. And 3 artists have put in hours and hours, the teams, it's not even just the artists, of putting in for that treatment. And you don't have that direct access to the client. So
right. Well, and believe me, when our clients ask to bid outside U.S., inside U.S., in a couple different ways, it gets hard we try to make them understand that it's a lot of work. And even I've heard this, broadcast production is now charging a fee for bidding.
I'm not surprised. The amount of people you have to have at your disposal, whether they be on staff or, available to you to work on a bid.
Right.
It's not just like, hey, give me numbers and you have a week to do it. It's, hey, give me numbers. You have 3 days to do it. I need 4 versions. And then I'm going to come back to you with all of these revisions. Right. And it takes so much more to get a job and land an estimate that it costs money. it's time, and it's hard to get people to, especially if you use freelance producers, right? I have a producer on staff, which is great, but at the same time, she might be on another production, so I can't depend on that. Yep. So what happens if the other producer I'm using is on a production?
Yeah.
So interesting. Okay, so what about budgets and estimates and usage? Let's start with budgets. Do your clients always give you the budget?
Yeah, nah. Sometimes a client will only have X amount of money for their marketing. And in that case, we would ideally know that at the concepting phase, and concepts are developed and are run past a producer to check for feasibility in executing it within the given budget. So that's one way of approaching. But if we're not given a budget per se, and we develop a concept and it's chosen, I'll work with a project manager on the team to determine timing and budget based on whatever the scope is, where it's going to be used, how many shots, all that stuff. And
then you'd share it with me, right?
No.
No, not always. Okay.
No, not always. I mean, so to be fair, I've got enough experience to pretty much know a fair budget for a production. If I didn't, I would do different research, but I pretty much know if I'm confident I have more than enough money in the budget, I probably wouldn't let you know that number.
Yeah.
If I were to say, I know this is going to be a difficult production, we have all these shots that I think we are only going to be able to get done we would need 3 days, but they're only allowing me 2 days, I would explain all of that in the bidding process. I'm open about knowing if I don't have enough budget for the scope, if it's going to require very critical thinking to be efficient, I will let people know what they're getting into and as far as that goes.
Yeah.
If I know I have a very adequate budget and I feel like we'll be comfortable, I'll just say I'm competitively bidding this. Please bid as you would, knowing you're bidding against 2 other people. And then we go from there. And
I think that's fair. I think what is frustrating is when we're not given a budget when someone knows it and there's not enough money.
Well, that's unfortunate because it causes too much spin.
Yeah.
And back and forth. And honestly, I don't have the time to waste with that. I'd rather let you know this is a limited budget. Do you think you can even do it?
Yeah.
And would you like to bid?
Yeah. And what can you get done for that? Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Do you work a lot with cost consultants?
Oh, yes, for sure. I would say work with them as a partner. Like if you disagree with something they want to cut, explain why you think it's important for the success of the production. I've always dealt with them that way, and I've never had any hostility or resistance. A lot of times they become a great asset in dealing with the client when the client wants to cut costs that are ultimately going to compromise a production.
Yeah.
So I find them, a lot of people, the account team is always, we have to deal with a cost consultant. And I'm like, I don't mind that. It's not going to be hard. I can deal with that. I know how to produce and I know what's important, and it's a collaboration.
That's where your persuasion comes in.
That's right.
I also think production consulting or cost consulting has evolved so much from when it first came on the scene, right? The people who are in these jobs now, maybe they've come from being, art producers before or something, and they know a lot. And it's not like it used to be where, why is a hair and makeup person that much money? I can get my hair cut for $100. What? I don't understand. Like, it's not those kind of questions anymore.
Yes.
Okay. Well, what about the award process? Do you feel like clients and agencies need to be better educated about?
This is funny because it still happens to this day, no matter how much I warn people. I think the most common problem I encounter at this point on a job is that once we've awarded, the client will inevitably come back and question the shoot dates. And there's a conflict that they did not bring up before, even though we've put a tentative schedule in front of them.
Yeah.
I always make it a point to let people know that when we award, we're locking in the dates, and any changes in shoot dates will cause overages and possible delays in the schedule, obviously. So
I almost want you to repeat that. I think that's really, really great. because sometimes we're asked to change shoot dates and we're, depending on where you are in the process, of course.
Yeah.
But like once something's award, I've booked people. So now I have to unbook them, check their availability. Like
and they may charge you.
And they may charge me.
Yes.
And also you've now taken my producer away from the production of the job to untangle this and basically rebook everything. So yeah, it is going to cost money.
Yeah, I get really, and I tell them, you're aggravating this artist, this team, even before we're getting there.
Yeah.
It's just not a great way to start the production. So I always try to stress as much. And I swear to God that account people will say, but I asked them. He confirmed with them. But when we say it will cost them money, they look at their whatever it is. And if it's a business thing, they try and get somebody to replace them. Or if it's a personal thing, they will think twice.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is your process in letting someone know they didn't get the job?
So in the past, I would always make a personal call to follow up. Sometimes now I'm just too busy, but I'll always send an email and I will ask if you want to talk to me either after the production or when I have time. I will answer any questions to let you know what I know about why you weren't picked. I will always try to get that information during the award process so that I can kind of know when I have to let people down, what the reason is, so they have that feedback.
Yeah, feedback is helpful, I think, especially given the amount of time and effort and, with the treatments and everything, just more than just, sorry, the client went in another direction. And anybody who listens to this podcast often has heard me say, just give me one more sentence. That's all I need. Sometimes that goes so much farther. It's very hard to tell an artist, oh, they went in a different direction. And that's it. Like, it falls so flat. There's usually, the producer, usually the stylist, if there's post-production, there's obviously the artist. So there's 4 or 5 people who've put in a lot of time into the bid. And just to hear, yeah, you didn't get it. Yeah. And maybe the client did just choose, or here's who we chose, or we chose someone very similar to you, but it wasn't about money. What they liked was their approach to this, like just something.
Exactly. No, I totally agree, 100,000%. I know the effort you all go through. I am sometimes, I love all 3, or I've worked with all 3, and it's hard for me to let people know, but that is the nature of what we do. We all know it. You all know when I'm triple bidding, and I try to be as open as I can through the process, and then I'll answer any questions openly at the end. So
you are very good at that, Kathleen.
Yeah, I've always just been a big believer of that. I think it just helps to help people trust you and want to work with you again. I mean, I wouldn't want to keep going doing estimates for somebody that just doesn't help me out. Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap up here, I'm curious, do you have any predictions for the rest of 2025?
Well, I thought about this, and I always feel like, what do I know? I do have an opinion.
Me hopes.
The biggest change is how agencies are getting production done for their clients, obviously. They're no longer have in-agency production departments a lot of times, but a completely different production arm under the holding company they go to use for production. So as an art buyer or integrated producer, I need to keep an open mind about the type of employment that I'll be able to get. I'm not so sure that it has a huge impact on the talent. Maybe if I knew how some of these holding company productions are operating, but I don't know too much about them to know if they're, how they're searching for talent and how they're engaging in talent and whatnot.
Yeah, I think that's a really big question. I think I'm going to have to get some people on the show and ask them.
Yeah, and I would be interested, as I said, for my future, I've mostly been full-time employee, but circumstances have changed, and I'm at a point where I can really embrace freelance. So I hope that it feels like to me that's where agencies are going for production. It doesn't seem like they have as many people on staff. because maybe there's not the need 100% of the time. So I think that feels like where it's moving to me.
So before we wrap up, I would love to ask you 2 questions that I ask everybody, all 100 and something episodes we've done. What is your favorite thing to do on a Sunday? And if you weren't producing, what would you be doing?
So my favorite thing to do on a Sunday is to lay in my hammock in the backyard and read after taking my dogs on a long walk. Hopefully the weather supports that.
I'm going to need some book recommendations.
Oh, gosh, I have so many.
Okay, good.
Okay, and if I weren't a producer, oh boy, I have so many things because as I've gotten older, I think about this a lot, wondering if I should have explored other careers either earlier in my life or throughout my work career so far. So a wardrobe or costumer, like actually creates. Like I sewed a bit during college, and I always love period costumes. You know, the elaborate wardrobe that happens, especially in theater, I think I would have done well at that.
Oh, that's so interesting. And what about your jewelry?
Yes, jewelry. I dabble in as a side hobby in making and selling necklaces and bracelets. So that has recently come about, and I've actually started doing that. So I feel good about that.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. And then there's 2 other things I would have done.
Oh, what?
Florist, because I love flower arranging.
Okay.
Some of these large and elaborate bouquets that are in extravagant vases that have these exotic flowers that reach all kinds of heights. I think they're amazing.
Oh, that's exciting.
And then house renovating. I've always bought fixer-uppers and have thoroughly enjoyed fixing them up and making them modern, but still keeping some of the nostalgia or charm.
I love that. You want to go into business together? I think that would be fun.
So I've got a lot of things.
I love it. That's great. Oh, awesome. Well, all of those things would use your production skills. And I know you as a person, and I know how creative you are, and I'm sure you would excel at any one of those things. So
wonderful. Thank you.
Well, a huge thank you for being here today. I thought all of your I thought the conversation was really insightful and helpful. And I know your time is valuable. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you. I really love these conversations, and I love talking about the business. So,
well, let's not wait another 5 years for getting you back on the show. So
sounds great to me.
All right. Thanks, Kathleen.
Thank you.